Not too bad. To the Institute of South Asian Studies, where, as you know, Professor Chizako, that we are a think tank who do serious policy research, and we also do, like you, academic work. So in some senses, the kind of abstract you've presented us looks ideal. You know, you were an associate professor at Kyushu, you engaging with one of the leading lights in China studies, Professor Ezra Vogel, whom I had once the great fortune of meeting in South Korea. And it seems from our abstract that you kind of bridge the scholarly policy divide, because we are hoping to learn from you about China-Japan interactions. And while we know a lot about South Asia, and China-Japan interactions, as you know, is important for South Asia, we are indeed delighted that you could find the time to be with us, and really looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm Chisako Masuo from Kyushu University, and for this school year, I'm at Harvard University as a coordinate research scholar, working with Professor Ezra Vogel. It is my big pleasure to be here and give a talk in front of many great scholars in Singapore. Today I would like to talk about East China Sea issues, basically between Japan and China. And I would like to give a briefing on how things have been taking place between those countries. Well, I am not sure if I can bridge the academics and policy studies. I think I'm just doing academic research, but I hope somebody can use my research results into to think about the new policy that can make East Asia or the entire Indo-Pacific region a much better region, much better place. Okay, so I would like to start my presentation now. Oh, the letters are too small, isn't it? Okay. Today, the topic I'm going to talk about is East China Sea negotiations and issues between Japan and China, because everybody knows that the two countries have the two countries are in tensions, but I think it has not been very much understood why those two countries are in tensions and why things have been developing between those countries. So today, first of all, I would like to explain why tensions are rising in East China Sea right now. And in a big picture, within a big picture, I would like to provide some implications of those issues onto the South China Sea issues as well. And in order to describe how tensions have been evolved between those countries, I would like to also discuss what have been negotiated between Japan and China and what have not been negotiated so well. And in the end of my presentation, I would like to give my idea on which direction are we moving for. Okay, so the first question, why tensions are rising in East China recently? Well, this is a graph. This table shows the number of articles that included 钓鱼岛 on People's Daily between 1970 to 2011. After 2011, the number jumps onto hundreds every year, so I didn't include that. And before 1969, the only article that mentioned 钓鱼岛 was the one in 1953. However, that did not use the name 钓鱼岛. It used the name Senkaku Islands. So on the People's Daily base, the only article before the 1969 that mentioned 钓鱼岛 was the one, and that used the word Senkaku Islands instead of 钓鱼岛. And so from this graph, I think, is this the way? You can see the first peak is here when China started to claim those islands. Before that, China never claimed the PRC, or you can also say ROC had never claimed 钓鱼岛 that to belong to 钓鱼岛or 钓鱼台 in Taiwan to be a part of China. And in 1968, the United Nations, one of the commissions in the United Nations carried a research in the surrounding area and found at that time they said huge reserve of petroleum in that sea. And then since then, China and Taiwan started to claim 钓鱼岛 to be their islands. And so when they started, I think in the end of December, in the end of 1970, in December they only had 4 articles that mentioned some sovereignty, that mentioned that China has some sovereignty in those islands. But the official claim was made in the December of 1971, which was about a year before China and Japan normalized its relations. And so after the normalization, China basically stopped claiming the 钓鱼岛 to be their attributes. But however, you can see since 1996, it started to claim those islands on the People's Daily again, and then it continued, with some fluctuations, it continued until today. Well, before I go into the details of my presentation, I would like to explain China's claim on Senkakus from Japanese point of view. Historical evidence, which is clear to, which seems to be very clear to many Chinese people, is very ambiguous in the Japanese eyes, because China has been showing a lot of historical records on the 钓鱼岛, and they say they named those islands first. But if you make records and can claim those islands, basically all the entire Asia will fall into China's. So you cannot really use those ways. So we think the historical evidence of Chinese occupation of 钓鱼岛 Islands are very ambiguous. And then documents such as Potsdam Declaration or Cairo Declaration do not mention about Senkakus. The title of Senkakus was determined at San Francisco Conference, Peace Conference held in 1951 in the United States. Although China or Taiwan, because of the problem between them, both of them could not attend San Francisco conference. However, what is tricky is that no official claim on those islands were made by Taiwan nor the mainland until the United Nations found petroleum reserve in late 1960s. So basically, although China and Taiwan were liberalized from Japan at the end of the war, the two sides never claimed those islands, and that's the biggest scars about those islands for them. And as I said, China's changes were made only after the UN Commission found petroleum reservation in the nearby water in 1969. However, as I showed in this table, China did put the issue aside between 1972 and 1992. In 1972, normalization with Japan took place. And 1992, China, as its domestic law, China established publicized law on the territorial water. And at that time, for the first time, China included Senkaku Islands to be a part of their territory. So until then, based on China's domestic law, there was nothing that claimed Senkaku Islands to be a part of their territory. And as you can see, in this table, from the domestic point of view, or from the domestic propaganda that Chinese Communist Party of China made toward their own people, another turning point is seen in 1996 here. So what made China strengthen their claim on Senkaku Island? I think this is a mysterious question, but actually a lot of things were taking place at that time. First of all, China, Japan, and South Korea, all of three East Asian countries, ratified United Nations Convention of Law of the Seas, UNCLOS, in the same year. So before that, because none of those countries ratified those, that means since 1996, all three countries had to go through the modification of maritime order in the East China Sea, because those countries were surrounding the same sea. And then another thing also took place especially in the March '96. There was election took place in Taiwan, and then that was the first free election to elect the Taiwan president. And then in the end, they elected Li Denghui to take office. However, you can remember at that time, China was very much nervous about Li Denghui making Li Denghui to declare independence under the name of democratization. So at that time, in order to threaten Taiwanese people, China made within a half year or so, China made a lot of military exercises in the surrounding seas. And they carried the biggest one in March, just before the election took place. So at that time, the United States decided this situation cannot be ignored, so sent two two carriers into the Taiwan Strait. So then China got very nervous and had to stop the military exercise that was taking they were carrying. And then this Taiwan Strait crisis made China very nervous. First of all, it felt when Taiwan was going to declare independence, U.S. might intervene the situation. And then another thing was that redefinition of the U.S.-Japan alliance was just taking the place in the same time. So based on the new U.S.-Japan alliance, China was very much worried that the United States and Japan will intervene in the situation. So they thought they also had to have, well, first of all, they also need to build their own carriers, and then they have to prepare for the next Taiwan Strait crisis. So since then, Chinese Chinese ships for scientific researches were crawling around the Taiwan Strait and carrying a lot of researches in preparation for the next Taiwan Strait crisis. And then another thing also took place in the same year. That was Hong Kong's Baodiao movement to protect Diaoyudao. It was a part of movement for Hong Kong's nationalism, but then it was just 1 year before Hong Kong returned to China. So from the mainland point of view, those new Taiwan citizens are making this nationalistic movement to protect Diaoyudao. In September, some Hong Kongese people went to they rent ships and went to Senkaku or Diaoyudao, and then in order to demonstrate their strong will, some of them dived into the water, and actually that included one who cannot swim, and then he just died in the water. And that was a very, well, some people say it's a really silly things to happen because, the waves are really huge. But for the mainland people, that's a very sacred movement to be memorized for the mainland people. So in order to, make the Hong Kong's return to China look more beautiful. In fact, the mainland started to publicize this event a lot. So that was one of the reasons this number jumped up this high. Actually, most of the articles on Senkakus were released after summer, and especially in September, in corresponding those Hong Kongese movement. So that was a brief story on China's claim on Senkakus. And actually, I also included this PRC diplomatic archive to show that China never really thought Senkaku to be a part of their territory before 60s. This is one of my friends found it in Chinese diplomatic archive, Chinese Library of Diplomatic Archives, and you can see that this record was made in 1950 in preparation of peace treaty between Japan and China, and then you can see that it included Senkakus. The name Senkaku is here, and so and it's talking about where Senkaku should go, and because at that time they never thought Senkaku, Okinawa, to be a part of Japan. For the mainland point of view, even Okinawa was to return to China. However, it didn't happen. But at that time, they did talk about Senkaku Islands within their diplomatic archive, but the name they used is Senkaku in Japanese style, and they never had this idea of a Diaoyudao at that time. But after this article was publicized on the media in Japan, Chinese government stopped showing their archives to foreigners, unfortunately. So, before going into the detailed negotiations, I would like to mention about Soviet-later consensus between Japan and China. When the nationalization event took place, China made a huge demonstration and said that there was a consensus between Japan and Japanese and Chinese leaders established in 1978, and that was and that said this issue, the Senkaku issues, can be put aside and solve it later. And China said it is that was a consensus, and based on the situations that Japan broke the consensus, their excuse was that China now can ignore the consensus and then send a lot of ships and take over the Senkaku Islands. That was their excuse. However, based on the research, based on the Chinese archives or Chinese sources, I think it is very difficult to assume that there was a consensus to solve it later, reached by the two countries in 1978 when Deng Xiaoping concluded the peace and friendship treaty with Japan in summer. In 1984, Deng Xiaoping mentioned in a meeting when I visited Japan and had press conference, maybe I don't need to read it all, but blah, blah, blah. But at that time, this speech is famous in Japan, in China, because it's in Deng Xiaoping Chronicles. So that's an official document everybody can read, and so that's this part is very much famous in China. So probably that's one of the reasons China later formed consensus or a legacy for consensus on Diaoyudao. But if you look at Deng Xiaoping did not mention that he had reached consensus with the Japanese leaders at that time. And then, according to the research based on the People's Daily, putting aside the issue does not appear on the newspaper at all from 1978 to 1995. And the first report on putting aside appeared in September 96 when those, Hong Kong activists dived into the water. But at that time, what appeared on the newspaper was that from early period, Chinese side had made a constructive proposal to Japan to put aside and jointly explore the water area. So at that time, China only said, we made a proposal. So it's not consensus. It never said Japanese side agreed or not. So it was just a mere proposal at that time. And then, however, People's Daily began to call it as a consensus reached by the both leaders, mainly from after 2004. So it changed the content somehow. And then, after they started to call it a consensus, the word again, the content again evolved into we have reached consensus to put aside the issue and solve it later. Well, Deng Xiaoping only mentioned this jointly explore the joint development of the water zones, but then Chinese media changed it, changed the content again. So Chinese consensus have been evolving over the years. So based on the Chinese source, I think it is very hard to assume that there was a consensus between the two countries in 1978. And I think it is almost impossible to assume that there was a consensus to solve it later at that time. So I think Chinese claim has been evolving all the time in terms of the 教育岛 issues. And I would like to go into the details now. Why? So it is. I think this is a very interesting question to think about. Why China found more values on senkakus after late 1990s, or in detail after 1996? Probably the reason may not be so much on the petroleum reserves, because no matter how United Nations reported in late 1960s, later Japanese side found that the reserves were not so big as the Commission reported at that time. So it's not, you can't really develop it on the commercial basis, basis. And however, in 1996, things were changing rapidly. First of all, the Cold War situations evolved into Cold War. After the Cold War, the international situations for China has been evolving into more harsh ones. China, after the Cold War, China could not maintain a friendly relationship with the United States anymore because of the Tiananmen incidents, and also dissolve of Soviet Union. And then China has been very sensitive about the changing security situations in East Asia, and also the redefinition of U.S.-Japan alliance made them very worried, and they thought it's against China. Oh, at that time, the two countries, U.S.-Japan, thought it's against North Korea, but China thought it's against us, and that's those countries are now trying to make efforts to contain China. And so in 96, maybe China had more security concerns, security-related concerns on Senkaku. First of all, it's very close to Taiwan. So, of course, if you can get Senkakus, that's much better, because you can also claim the surrounding water area near Senkakus. So that will make it a lot easier for China. And also the submarine routes, if you think about the real war and think about the submarine routes, I've heard that Senkaku is a very good area, that because submarines usually want to hide themselves in the deep water, and geologically Senkaku is very good for it. And also if China wants to keep the United States away from Taiwan, their claim on Senkaku is going to be very important. I'm going to talk about it in the next map. And also, probably in 96, of course, China had bigger considerations on UNCLOS. Because Senkaku, well, I can show this map now. Senkaku is in a very strategic area under UNCLOS. this is the map of East China Sea. And this is the median lane. Japan thinks that should be the demarcation line of economic exclusive zones between Japan and China. However, China claims that all of this area, just like 9-dotted line in South China Sea, all of this area should belong to China because there is a Okinawa Trough, and so this is the deepest line in East China Sea. China thinks, well, at least in terms of East China Seas, China claims that this entire continental shelf should belong to them because this is connected to the continent. So this area should be the continental shelf to themselves. And if you claim that, this Senkaku Islands is very important because it is on the continental shelf. So if Japan has territories on the continental shelves, the logic China claims does not make sense at all. So China has to have this Senkaku Islands to claim all of the continental shelf. And that really makes sense for China because this line is almost equal to what is called the first island chain. And so if China wants to keep the United States away from this area, it is the easiest way that China claims all of the water zones here. So China has been trying very hard to claim that those water area to be theirs, and in terms of the international law, China is also claiming that within their economic EEZs or on the continental shelves, those coastal countries should have similar rights, sovereign rights, to exclude other countries' military ships. So their claim is, as you all know, is somewhat different from our understandings. And I think I missed something. Oh, yeah. So in order to, I want to emphasize that this line is the maximum line that China can probably claim according to the international law. And basically,
which line? The blue line or the red line?
The dotted red line here. China is claiming the entire zones to be a part of their continental shelf.
And the blue line is what Japan wants.
Yeah, Japan.
No, exclusive economic zone.
Yeah,
which
well.
is a zone that's already assigned by UNCLOS.
This is the 200
It's not a
kilometers.
claim. It's not a claim.
Well,
This is a zone.
EEZs and continental shelves, it's kind of confusing under the UNCLOS. So when Japan wants to demark the line, Japanese government thinks that this should be the median line between the two countries. So this is the equal resolution between the two countries. However, China, in terms of East China Seas, they never want to accept median line that they used to demark the Tonkin Bay or Bay One between China and Vietnam, because
When there is overlapping economic zones, they use the median line.
yeah. So in terms of Tonkin Bay,
The exclusive economic zone is, how is it defined? 200 kilometers? Or
200 kilometers,
200
but
kilometers, right?
this
So
well,
this is that, the blue dotted line is,
the median line.
so how much would be 200 kilometers from the Chinese
Probably around
They
here,
overlap,
around
they
here.
overlap,
They
so
overlap.
that's not meaningless.
So the Chinese are
Want to
trying to
have-
claim more than what would be the conventional exclusive economic zone using the continental shelf definition.
Yes, yes.
That's the position.
Yes, yes. And how China wants to demark their exclusive zones or a continental shelf depends on the situations. Because in terms of Tonkin Bay, actually that's the only case China has demarked their water zones. And in terms of Tonkin Bay's territorial, they have already demarked territorial water between China and Vietnam in Tonkin Bay in 2000, I think. But at that time, China used median lane because if they use the continental shelf logic, they will lose more water area. So in that case, they used a median lane. They, of course, Vietnam wanted to wanted China to think about more on the geological structure, but China refused to do that and then used the median lane. But here, it's just opposite. China wants to claim all of the continental shelf. So China's claim is always depending on the situation, not really depends on the international law.
Claim if Taiwan is on its side. If Taiwan is not inside, the claim is very weak.
Taiwan,
Because your Senkaku Islands is closer to Taiwan than it is to China.
well, I can talk about it
So
in
the
a different.
assumption is that, you know, if Taiwan is part of China, then this is part of China. It's a
Yeah,
stronger,
but Taiwan and Senkaku doesn't really have historical relationship at all.
but in terms of maritime territorial waters and EEZ. No, true, but the claim is stronger. It's not waters, it's economic resources assigned to you by UNCLOS. UNCLOS already assigned to you 200 nautical miles of EEZ. So you don't need to claim it, it's yours. But when there are overlapping claims, it's a median line that is drawn. Is it?
Oh, that's our understanding.
Yeah, I mean the UNCLOS basically states that. I'm not going to
Yeah.
be different from UNCLOS.
So, Professor Chisako, how much longer do you think you will take?
Oh, okay. So, how much time do I have? Well,
How much time would you like to take ideally?
oh, okay. So,
I mean, the question is, I mean, if you conclude quickly, then we can have more questions. If
yeah,
you-
okay. 10 more minutes?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, okay. So I will go quickly from here. What have been negotiated between Japan and China? What have not been negotiated? There were so many talks carried on East China Sea between the two countries, and I have listed here. But there was, I think there is a certain pattern that two countries followed in each cases. For most of the cases, negotiations were carried based on the issues, and usually China takes a new action in the disputed area here. I mean, disputed water zones between this dotted blue line and the dotted red line, because Japan claims this and China claims this. So this is the disputed area that the two countries all agree. And then after China takes a new action around the East China Seas, Japan requests negotiations. And usually China delays to talk. And then Japan upgrades the communication channel. And then talks may reach an agreement. However, after a few years, it's usually been ignored by Chinese side. So it cannot really solve much problems. And then China takes a new action and starts a new issue again. This is the basic pattern we have followed. And I have listed this, I have drawn 3 cases. One is new fishery agreement that was negotiated between 96 to 97 and concluded once, but then China delayed about 3 years to ratify it. Some sort of debate seems to be taking place in China at that time. We don't know. But similar things had happened between China and South Korea, so that's what I assume. But then, anyway, those two countries decided not when this was the first negotiation that took place after the UNCLOS was ratified by those countries. And I think this was a very important case, but it only solved the fishery issues. So it's still good. It had some fruits, but it couldn't solve the EEZ issues or EEZ demarcation between the two countries. And I will skip this. And while those two countries were carrying negotiations on fishery agreement, new issues was already taking place. That's research vessels, some sort of research activities made by China in the disputed area. Because of the UNCLOS, because UNCLOS basically defines that the coastal states has the right to conduct research activities. Japan was very worried why China is carrying those activities in the disputed areas, because that's both countries do agree that they have the disputes in this area. So Japan wanted to have negotiations with China, and then after upgrading the communications channel, China did agree to establish prior notification system or framework with Japan. So according to it, the country that wants to carry scientific research in those disputed area have to notify the other 2 months prior to it. However, and China followed it for the first several years, but after that started to ignore it somehow. And then meanwhile, China began to drill gas fields along the median line in early 2004. So it also, before it reached the real resolution, it evolved into a new issue. And then joint development of resources. This was a very important issue because China was drilling. China has begun to drill gas fields just on the median line. So if the basic underground structure is connected to the Japanese side, Japanese gas resources can be absorbed by China. So Japanese, it was a big nationalistic news carried by the Japanese mass media, and people in Japan was very frustrated about this event, and requested China to carry a negotiation. And it took a long time to negotiate, and but finally in 2008, both countries agreed that they are going to carry joint development of the gas fields in those areas. This was the most famous gas field, Chunshao or Shirakaba in Japanese, and another area which is on the northern side. And those two countries have agreed to carry gas development in those areas. And in terms of other areas, the further negotiations was to take place. However, China continued. Well, according to Japanese understanding, before the final treaty was going to be concluded between the two countries, Chinese side should also stop or resume the gas development in those areas. But China continued anyway. And then, in addition, in December 2008, China sent 2 official vessels within the territorial water of Senkaku for the first time. So after 2012, of the normalization between the Japanese normalization of Senkaku Islands, China started to send more and more vessels and said it's because of Japan broke the consensus. But in reality, China did started to send ships to Senkaku Islands in 2008. And of course, after this situations, negotiations just stopped. Japanese side repeatedly asked China to negotiate more, but China just delayed the meetings. So it never went smoothly, and it seems like it's been put it on the shelf already. So overall assessment, Japan and China had discussed each issue on East China Seas within when it arose. So it's basically issue-based negotiations. While Japan proposed negotiations, China decided the pace. When it wants to carry it, it carried. But when it wants to resume it, it stopped. And basic issue, demarcation of EEZs or continental shelf remain to be unsolved. And territorial issues has been also untouched. And even before the demarcation was settled, China had been pushing very hard to establish effective control in the disputed areas, not only around Senkakus, but also in the entire continental shelf in the East China Seas. So I think we can see that Japanese approach is negotiation-based, and it prefers to negotiate based on the international laws. However, China is more action-based approach. It is reluctant to talk, but to take the actions first. So to me, it seems like the difference between the two worldviews. And I'm going to skip this. I just wanted to explain that China has expanded domestic control into the disputed areas, just like it's doing in the South China Sea. And which direction are we moving for? There are some lessons learned by Japan on China in the East China Sea. No matter who runs the office or if the Prime Minister visits the Yasukuni Shrine or not, China's expansion continued. So China often claims that Japan does this, Japan does that, and we are so reactive. But actually, the ball is not on Japanese side. And also, it is almost hopeless to expect issue resolutions with China through fair negotiations based on the international law, unfortunately. China will use negotiations to bite time and grow more strength. That was the reality that took place in the last 20 years. And China does not hesitate to use force to achieve its national goals against Japan. And it wants to keep the U.S. away from the Chinese continent. And Chinese leaders will do their best to avoid seemingly capitulation in the eyes of their people. So any kind of moves that China does in terms of cooperation with Japan will be harshly criticized by the Chinese citizens already because of the domestic anti-Japanese propaganda they daily makes. China makes daily. So, and in addition to it, China will use history issue as a tool to attack Japan. Tracking back the process, you cannot really say that Senkakus are the legacy of the World War II, but China is making propaganda as it is, and at this well, I used to believe that Chinese people are much better, but based on the recent situations, I can only say that Chinese government is at least making the history issue as its diplomatic tool to attack Japan. And expected direction between the two countries. Well, the tensions between Japan and China is almost structural. It will continue within the foreseeable future. So we cannot expect this tension will go down in the near future. And the next peak is likely to be the 70th anniversary of the World War II. China will criticize Japan and attack Japan very harshly in the coming summer. And the next step we are worried about is that, first of all, more coercion on Senkaku Island, probably from the water or from the airspace. Or the second option is that China may carry more activities in the disputed area in the East China Sea, such as drilling, just like it did in Paracel, near Paracel, within the Paracel waters against Vietnam. And based on these situations, Japan will need to consider ways to strengthen defense. So there will be a lot of domestic measures taken by the Japanese government. And some people even say that because the United States is weakening, and Japan needs to, if Japan finds the United States not so reliable, then it may have to rely on nuclear capacity. But I don't think it will take place in the near future, because Japanese anti-nuclear sentiment within Japanese society is very strong. And we also recently had Fukushima events, so it's not something very possible in the future. But logically, I think longer run, it is an option for the Japanese government. I hope it will not take place, but it might be an option for the Japanese government. And if China pushes very hard, and what is taking place in entire region, both Japan and China are trying to cultivate new ties with other countries. So I think this is a part of new driving force to transform the entire regional relations, and that might, no matter Japan or China, those two countries will try to develop or foster warmer ties with Southeast Asian countries or South Asian countries. And China has been doing already very well with Central Asian countries. And Japan is also trying to enter into the Central Asia. So it will become a part of the driving force. This tension, the bilateral tension, will become a part of the driving force that will transform the entire region. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening.